Tatty.
Hi, Grace.
We are here.
We are here.
And I don't know how to introduce you other than I'll start with Tatty and I had a blissful time being housemates at one point.
That's a big word. We're using it.
Blissful. We're using it. Blissful time. Interesting time.
Mm-hmm. A transitional time.
A transitional time.
Very different places in both of our lives.
Very different places. Yeah. Cultural calculator didn't exist.
Yeah.
Tatty was not famous yet. We'll come on to that. And we became very good friends. COVID hit. Mm-hmm. That happened. We were locked down, separated.
We weren't living together by then.
And we also, during lockdown, the communication, it fell apart.
Yeah, but I don't really judge that.
No, I don't judge that.
I think that happens for a lot of...
I mean, come on, we all fell into a bubble.
But even outside of lockdown, I think it's okay if you don't speak to people for an extended period of time and then you reconnect. I mean, good friendships will...
Oh, true. It never changes with a good friendship. So, lockdown happened. Tatty was secretly becoming famous.
You're using this as such a big word. It's not that. I started doing online sketches and I built up an online following. That doesn't translate to fame in the traditional sense.
She is a famous stand-up comedian now.
And I'm going to let you big that up because I feel like it's beneficial to your podcast, but I don't know that this is completely true, but we'll go with it.
It's 100% true. And last time I saw her, I mean, you were a struggling actor.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We can use...
A struggling actor with a lot of different jobs, which we will dive into.
Yeah.
So unbeknownst...
I'm supposed to interrupt you, am I?
Yeah, this is why.
Sorry.
Unbeknownst to me, she had become famous, but I just opened my front door to her one day and screamed, "Your hair's pink." And
can I just say, you had invited me round.
She started stalking me. No. I had invited her around for a long overdue catch up.
Yeah.
Her hair was pink and she had become famous stand-up comedian. So I'm going to pass over to Tatty to introduce herself in a far more succinct way than I've just done.
So yeah, my name's Tatty McLeod. I am a stand-up comedian. When I met Grace, I was an actor. So it's been a long journey into becoming a stand-up. I went to drama school. I went to university, did something completely different, came out, didn't know what I wanted to do, went to drama school, did an MA, came out, was like, I'm going to be an actor, didn't get any work, thought, okay, I'll be a director. Did that for a bit, wrote some plays, directed some stuff, and then sort of found myself into stand-up. And I've been doing that consistently since end of 2018, 2019. And then obviously COVID hit. And then I went online, built a following up, and now I'm back doing stand-up and also do social media stuff as well. So in between the two.
Okay, so when you say you built your following up online,
yeah,
how and what?
Well, look, come and see my show. Is it too early for a plug?
No, it's never too early for a plug.
No, but there is a bit in my show where I talk about this, and it was quite funny because, so genuinely what happened was 2020, bad year for everyone, and it feels so surreal thinking back on that time. But I just come back from New York and Chicago where I spent 5 weeks. I was doing stand-up and some comedy courses out there, really trying to hone my craft. I came back, I just moved in with my boyfriend at the time. In the time I was in the US, I realized I didn't want to be with him, came back, broke up, moved out of his in with my sister with the intention of being there for a couple of weeks before moving into my new place. And in that time, I lost my job. I was working as a tour guide. I lost my job, couldn't afford to move anywhere else. So ended up spending most of that lockdown with my sister, her husband, and my 2 young nieces. So it was a big shift in life. I met someone, and at this point, I think I got a random job in a law firm. I met someone, I started dating him, and I began to think to myself, well, maybe, my life, maybe all this performative stuff is just too much work. There's something quite nice about having a 9 to 5 and knowing what your hours of work are and having your evenings free and being able to budget and take holiday, take paid holiday, this mad luxury, paying towards a pension. So I started to get myself in this headspace, and then we broke up end of 2020. And then I thought, well, fuck him. And I've got all this spare time that I'm not spending with him. What am I going to do with it? And I decided to start making online comedy videos. 2 reasons. 1, because I had the time. 2, it was a creative outlet. And then 3, if I'm being really honest, just because I was like, well, fuck you. you're going to see my face on social media.
Well, he is now.
And then it's just got way out of hand. And 3 years later, here I am. So it was a bit of revenge reeling, which has really spiraled.
But this is something where, one of the things that I actually wanted to ask you about, people talk a lot about being a solo founder, and I know you're in a very different world, you're in the creative industry, but actually Tatty has given some of the best pep talks ever when it comes to having to push through those moments of, I guess, like, on the one hand, it's like patience, but like the tenacity to not give up. And one of my lovely friends, I will not name her, was having a mini doubting, I don't know, a doubting spiral.
Was this in Paris?
Yeah. And this was like 18 months in or something. And Tatty looked at her and she was basically said, over to you.
Is it the one where and what did I say to her?
Tatty's like, I don't even know. You basically said, like, how many years did it take to get to where you are now, where you've got like 100?
I remember if it's the person who I'm thinking of, it was wild because actually her business was doing really well. She was turning over like a really big income and not quite a profit yet, but she was turning over a really substantial income. And I think she'd been doing it for 18 months. And I was like, how dare you? So that's wild. Yeah, I started being a performer in earnest when I went to drama school. I think I came out 2015 maybe. I'm now 34. The first time I started making enough money to live off my craft was 2021. September 2021, I quit my job, and that was the first time that I didn't have a secondary job supporting me being a performer. So let's say that I left drama school in 2015. That was 6 years of working odd jobs, doing other bits, trying to support myself whilst being a performer. So the idea that after 18 months, you're already earning a really decent income from this, but you've got self-doubt was just like, well, you're already there.
But how did you personally, keep your mind afloat? Because 6-7 years is, it's a long amount of time to feel like you don't have that certainty yet of this is definitely going to pay off. Like, how did you navigate that for yourself?
I think you've got to reframe it for yourself. So in the beginning, you want it to sort of fly and you go into it. And I think it's the same whether or not you've got starting a business or whether you're a performer. You hope that you're going to be one of the lucky ones where it just you catapult out the door and it just sort of flies. We all want to be that person. And then when it doesn't, you have to start reframing it. You sort of go, okay, well, that's obviously not the pathway that I'm onto. We're into this. It's been 24 months. And I've still got my minimum wage job. I'm working this many hours plus this many extra hours on trying to build up that business. Like, where's the payoff here? And I think you've got to start thinking about it much more as a marathon. And I know people say it, but as a marathon and not as a race. And you have to start enjoying the journey. Like, that would be the biggest tip that I would give myself if I was looking back on it. I would say, don't think to yourself you're going to get some random side job that you hate because in 12 months you're already going to be, walking the boards at the National. Don't think that. Get a job in a production company. Get a side job which you don't hate, which you can also build up, that you can take pride in and that you can enjoy, because it might take you 10 years before you get there. So don't give yourself a horrible journey, because I think that when you give yourself the horrible journey, you're more likely to give up on it, because the hustle of the minimum wage job, which is exhausting, which is not paying your rent, and then also the rejection you're getting constantly through whatever business you're trying to build or through being a performer, on both sides you're failing. So I look at it much more now as like a longer journey. And ultimately, I think every year that goes on where you haven't succeeded, you're stripping back to the core of, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? What is this really about? Why am I here? And you get to a place that's like very deep of like, well, I just can't do anything else. And I just love this. And I just, this is it. This is it. And what happens through the process of those years after drama school is that people go, no, I can't bear this, for the mental health implications, for the exhaustion. And then the few that sort of straggle on, you know, at the core of it, you've got people who are just completely obsessed with the work and sort of like, come what may, have just decided that they're going to keep at it and hopefully something's going to give.
That's so true about the stripping back to the core, because it's kind of crazy when you think about, I don't know, I guess the path that you're choosing and how it really isn't fun for a long, long time. And it's not just like, oh, it's not fun in terms of being in the abyss of like that uncertainty. It's also like your personal life is in many ways on hold. Like you can't afford to necessarily do the things your friends are doing. Like you feel like your life isn't progressing in line with that societal measuring stick of where it should be. And I've definitely, like, that resonates with me so much. Like I've had those moments where like a parent or someone has been like, are you sure this is like, you know, you don't just want to go get a high paid job somewhere else? And it's like those moments where you're like, well, no. Yeah. So I guess I just got to keep on suffering on.
Well, you've got to have so much conviction in what you're doing. And that's really hard when you're on your own pushing it forward. It's like, this doesn't exist outside of myself. I'm making this happen. You're someone who's intelligent, you're ambitious, you've got capacities. I was picking up these random jobs and, you know, I might do like temping somewhere and then I'd be offered a full-time job. And you're starting to think, am I wasting myself? Most of my time is spent being a waitress. And it's no negativity to being a waiter, you know. I think also that's something that I've learned by having lots of odd jobs, not wanting to come into the conversation being like, oh, that's a crappy job. Being a waiter is a very lovely job if that's what you want to do, but it's being conscious of the fact that that isn't something that I enjoy doing. And so you're sort of spending most of your time doing something you don't want to do when you could be doing things that you find really interesting because you've got that skill set, but you're sacrificing that in this like greater ambition. And I think the only thing that does definitely happen, I notice, is that, I don't want to use the word desperation, but you definitely get to a place where it's sort of like, I just got more shameless. You know, actually making online videos and putting them out there and getting up on stage, it's like you're constantly just being like, it's like pulling a plaster off. I'm just going to have to do it. I've just got to do it. I'm just going to have to put myself in that really uncomfortable position because actually I need to move this forward. And the longer it goes on where it hasn't moved forward, the more you sort of have to think laterally and go, right, where can I grow? Where can I take this? You know, you might not want to send that email to that random person, but you get to a point where you're like, well, I need to try something. I'm going to have to send it. And I think it kind of pushes you forward. But another thing, you know, when you're talking about that sense of like, you know, people are moving a certain way and you're not. Yeah. And I think that's also where like not having wealth behind you becomes like a really big part of the conversation for anyone who goes into being an entrepreneur or like a solo, how did you call it? A solo founder, because you're someone who you've got to have real conviction in what you're doing because it's actually like embarrassing. You know, you're 32, you're broke, you're meeting people, like, you know, dating people, you're going to dinner parties, everyone's super affluent or they've got really good jobs, they're really farther in their career than you are. You know, you can't afford to go on these holidays that other people are going on. There's nothing to fall back on. You're thinking to yourself, how am I going to afford to have a family? You know, so you're beginning to see all the sacrifices that you're making and to keep your sense of status. And like, I have value, my value, you know, sometimes you're working in some crappy job that you hate and you're sat there being like, oh my God, is this is this me? Is this me? And you have to like elevate yourself beyond that. And like, I am not, this is not, I am working towards, and constantly like reframe that goal and really stay with the conviction on it.
But also it just shows how much like that societal measuring stick does unconsciously put some kind of internal pressure, because the reality of life, right, is like we're all on our own journey. Like there is no one way of going about anything. But it's just so interesting. Like I think of myself as someone that's like liberal in the way I think about things, and yet even me, like I can notice that sort of voice like can sometimes creep in those low moments, and you have to really like bat it away and remind yourself that actually like that's just a construct. It's not real. It's not an actual
But then there's levels to that, because you've got the level of how successful I feel like I should be given my age, and you know, looking around me what people are doing. And then you've also just got the basic level of the comfort of living, like how am I living? And I think that like that higher level never goes away, you know, that sense of what am I achieving in relation to my peers. And that is very much a construct, and it is something which you've got to be wary of, because you know, ambition's important, but it can push you into a place of just ambition for ambition's sake, and you're moving away from like the joy in the work, and the creativity doesn't flow when you're just doing stuff for ambition's sake. But from that place of being able just to afford to live and to live comfortably. And when I say comfortably, I mean you're not worrying constantly about how you're going to pay your rent and what your next paycheck is, and can you afford to go on holiday even just like once a year, and what does this mean in the long term? I don't even have a pension, and things like that. And genuinely, like, can I ever afford to have children? How is that going to work? Making choices about the kind of partners you think you should be with, because you should be compensating for the fact that you don't earn it. Like, these are the kind of choices that people who are in careers which come with a sense of financial frailty start making. And those are not necessarily the choices that you would make for yourself if you were in like a comfortable financial situation. So that's what I mean about kind of, you know, that those are the challenges that come with it as well.
But there's also something that I feel like you touched on earlier, where there's also, this is where it gets a bit woo-woo, guys. But it's like how life can come in. Like, do you know what I mean? Where it's like you can be at a really low point, and then like I've noticed in like the journey of Cultural Calculator, like this has been 3 years now, I can recall like where I have got to those moments of being like, maybe like this just isn't going to go where I want it to. And it's been at those moments where like, you know, a new customer walks through the door, or like something happens where it feels like, whoa, that's so serendipitous, that just as I'm like on the edge of like, really, like something comes in to be like, no, like keep going. And there's a kind of flow to that as well, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think ultimately, if you keep putting out work and possibilities, because that's been my approach in terms of my work, has always been, you've got to do the work. You just do the work. You know, as a performer, there was a lot of focus when I was at drama school on write to agents, write to casting directors, write to people, try and get casting stuff. And actually I found that what was more successful was actually to make things, make work, build yourself a profile, and then people come to you. So that's always been my focus. Doing is the thing, work is the thing. But at the same time, I would say, like, in response to that, I also do think it's really okay for people to give up. And I don't know, I feel like that's like a really untrendy thing to say. Maybe it's a bit different in business, I don't know. But certainly I would say from a performer's perspective, whether you're an actor or musician or whatever, I think it's okay at some point to be like, do you know what? Is this making me happy? And you've got to ask yourself, if you're on this journey for 10 years and you check in with yourself and you go, it's been 10 years in this shitty side job that I don't like, that isn't making me happy. I'm living somewhere I don't want to live because the rent's super cheap. I'm sacrificing my friends' weddings, my family's wedding. All of this so that I can get 2 lines in an advert. Like, it's not working. It's not working. So also not to be like a slave to the dream or feel like it's a failure to go, this isn't making me happy. I don't want to do this anymore. So I also encourage people to do that.
That is so true. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about getting down to the core. Yeah. Like getting down to the core of yourself. And if like the core is actually saying like, I really don't want this anymore, versus when the core is saying, I have no choice but to do this because this is 100% what I want. Yeah. And it's like, I guess it's knowing yourself enough to be able to discriminate, like, what is a idea I'm trying to push or a truth I'm trying to resist.
Yes.
Versus the core.
Yeah, because actually the reality of the work is the experience you're having of it. So in the mind, there's an image of what it is, but the reality of it is, even when you have a super successful business, the reality of it is you're behind your desk, you're writing emails, you do work you don't want to do. It's not, if you're not in a place of like, God, I'm obsessed with this and I absolutely love it and I want to keep doing it and there's going to be crap bits and there's going to be great bits, it's not going to work. And that's because that's the reality of it. The reality of it is a journey, and it's not always, it's not always brilliant. So I think, exactly to say, you've got to always check in with yourself and go back to the core of it and clock in as to whether or not you're persevering with something because you've got an idea of what that is, and because you're afraid to say, I've dedicated 10 years to this and actually it's not for me. I don't want to be a failure, so therefore I'm persevering in it. Or if it's actually that, maybe actually that reality of what that job isn't what you thought it was, and now that you've experienced it, you don't want to do it.
So my mum uses this model where it's like omnipotence at one end, like that belief of I can do anything and everything. And often when people go with like an omnipotent fantasy of themselves, there's a huge fall that has to happen to impotence, where it's like the other end of the spectrum, like this feeling of like, I can't do anything. Like both are extreme, like I can do everything, or impotence, I can't do anything. Yeah. And she uses this model to get people to think about what is a relatively potent idea, i.e. the middle line in between the two, that works creatively with the constraints and the limitations of reality. Yeah. So it's being creative and open to possibilities whilst not denying the restraints and limitations that exist.
Yeah, and but see that, I think it's a really interesting idea as well, because you do have to be quote unquote delusional to go into the world of a performer and think that you're going to make it. And that delusionality or delusional aspect of yourself is actually really important. And people talk about it a lot. I mean, I think I was listening to Karen Millen talk about founding, Karen Millen back in the day. And very much, she was like, to be honest with you, youth was entirely on our side because we were completely naive. We didn't have a clue. If we had a clue, I'm not sure we would have made the choices that we made.
That is also so true.
We took such risks that we wouldn't take if we'd been properly informed or educated or known about, so that sort of that delusional aspect is really important in just having the faith that you can do it, because if you're looking at it on paper, you're absolutely not going to succeed.
Yeah, it's the same with being a performer, starting business, exactly the same. Like I was so naive in terms of, I thought, that whole catapult out the window dream. Yeah. I was like, within a year, I'm going to be making tons of money and just rolling around in it and doing the thing I love the most.
Yeah.
And it's just not the case. Like, even like how you said, oh, I had to get to the point where I was willing to be a bit shameless with like sending that email I don't want to send. Like, that was such a process for me as well. Like, I remember someone saying to me, you need to be the voice of culture. You need to be writing everything, posting everything. And I was like, I don't even have social media myself. Like, I have a fear of posting anything. Like, I get anxiety about posting anything. And it took me until, I guess like 2.5 years to finally be like, fuck's sake, I've really got to get over that one.
Yeah, you've got to put yourself out there.
100%.
You've got to put yourself out there.
Before you became famous stand-up comedian, one of your jobs was actually working for a consultancy and going in and, well, you'll be able to explain it better than me, but doing like improv acting and acting skills in general to actually support people in the workplace in terms of how they manage situations, how they open up to innovation. And this is quite relevant for the type of stuff we normally talk about on here. So if you could give us a little whistle-stop tour of that and anything that you think, I guess, are the key takeaways of like what the purpose of that kind of work is. And I know you still do some of it.
Yes, I do. I do still do some of it. I like to keep, you know, that side of work going. So I got into it because actually I think there is a big crossover of people who have come from a performance background, whether that be improv or acting, and the world of coaching and leadership development. So there's lots of people who are ex-performers or still sometimes performers who are also coaches, and that's how I got into it. So I started doing some training with a company in London, and I met lots of people through that. And I mean, you know, there's so many different ways in which you can sort of use your acting background. If we just talk about pure acting, a lot of the work that I would be doing in relation to sort of working with businesses and linking acting would be to do role play. So it's quite simple, but it's incredibly effective in terms of getting people just to play out situations, difficult people they're working with, or scenarios which make them feel very uncomfortable. And then I would be given a breakdown of who is this person, what's their character, how do they behave, what are their characteristics, and then you would come into a space with them and bring that individual to life, so we can have a real life sort of practice of how they're going to manage that difficult conversation. So that's one level of how performance work is helpful in that context. And then also using improv, which is a different skill to acting, but improv is something which is all on off the cuff. You're inventing as you go along, and it's really, really, really helpful to develop sort of a good group dynamic and what would you call it? Sort of a more supportive work environment, because the fundamentals to improv is yes and. It's this idea of you say something, I build on it, then I say something, you build on it, and we're constantly building on each other's ideas. The only valid idea is the one that's just been spoken in the room. You chuck away the last thing. Don't come into the space with your own agenda. I mean, these are all things that if you're talking about a business in which you want to sort of like create an environment of innovation and sort of like, I don't want to say blue sky thinking because that word has been used too much, but that kind of innovative open-mindedness, that kind of lateral thinking, improv is really good for it. So those are the two ways in which I sort of bring those skills to the table.
Okay, now let's do a yes and situation, because you're kind of explaining this, that basically, I guess it's very easy in any kind of team actually to sort of clamp down or narrow in on there being like, this is my idea, this is what we need to do, versus a mindset of being more open-minded. And I guess that's what that phrase yes and brings, is that building you spoke about.
Yeah.
Which interestingly, our friend Faye, shout out, who's a primary school teacher, they do the exact same thing in classrooms now, that when a kid puts their hand up, says something, they're like, yes, and get all the
Oh
kids
my God,
to
the
sort
French
of build
in me is dying. It's like, but also some things shouldn't be yes and it. No,
Also
you
true.
can't pick your nose. I mean, not that they asked permission for that, but yes. So the way that yes and works, I mean, if I was doing it in the context of a corporate environment and you're doing like games and play, you'd play it out a bit differently. But you need you need a whole setup for that. But if we were just doing it in, like, let's do it the two of us, it will be I don't know, let's start with a scenario. We take a location. Alvin, can we have a location? Mauritius. Okay, but where in Mauritius? So like, a place sorry? I'm in Port-Louis, lovely. And what are we doing? Okay, we're in Port-Louis shopping in the market. So I would open with, let's get some bananas. And you say yes and?
Yes and a pineapple.
Yes and a mango.
Yes, and why can't we think of anything except fruit right now?
We've only done two things.
Sorry. Yes, and a bikini for the beach.
Yes, and we can get a volleyball to play on the beach with.
Yes, and some beach bat and ball.
Yes, and we can have a beach bat and ball competition.
Yes, and some flippers.
Okay, so I'll just pause there. Think about what I just said. Yes, and we can have a beach and volleyball competition. And you've just gone, yes, and some flippers. How does that link into what I've just said?
Do you know what I've done? This is what happens. This is what happens in workplaces. My mind has already thought of something before listening to what you had said, and I didn't build on what you said. I went with the idea that I had before you said.
And that's what we're trying to stop happening in rooms.
Okay, fine. Wow, that's so wild as well how that happens.
Yes, so quickly. Because we're nervous.
So you've got to think ahead.
It's going to come to me. I need to have something. I'm in a meeting. I'm going to be asked to speak. I need to have an idea. Okay, this is my idea. Right. When's it going to come to me? When's it going to come to me? We're not listening. We're not listening. We're not listening. We're not listening. It comes to me. We've missed opportunities. We've missed new ideas. We've missed mind melds of, oh, well, that triggers something. Oh, well, let's build on that. And instead we're in our lanes because we're so afraid of saying something that's going to make us look stupid.
Tatty.
Stop it, Grace.
Okay, now I also want us to use some time to talk about you, where you're going with what's next for Tatty, and yeah, I guess your intentions behind that as well.
But not linking into leadership development stuff. Do you feel the need to, do we need to link it back to like being an entrepreneur?
I don't think it has to link back, but because I think you are an entrepreneur, and so like
I definitely do consider myself an entrepreneur.
Exactly, and I feel like this is like your next step on that journey that we were referencing earlier.
I would actually say that I think that increasingly creatives are having to become entrepreneurs, because when I think of an entrepreneur, and I'm not saying this disparagingly, but I think of entrepreneurs as being people who there's a bigger focus on financial. It's sort of like the marker of the success is whether or not the business is financially doing well. And I think what's complicated about being a creative is that you can have great creative success and not make any money. And so they're on slightly different lanes, but increasingly creatives are having to become entrepreneurs because there's very little funding, grants. It's very difficult to live a frugal life just because the cost of living is so high that if you are a creative, you're having to develop a business brain. You have to build a brand. You have to be on social media. You have to be putting up clips of yourself, letting your putting your brand out there. You have to figure out how to make money because no one is going to pay you a lot of money to do what you want to do. It's very difficult to make a living out of it. So that, I think, is a newer phenomenon. I don't think it was the case 20 years ago when you were a creative. I think you could be much more pure in your artistry than these days.
That's so true. And I guess ultimately, right, you say, entrepreneurs more focused on the financials, but ultimately entrepreneurs have to be focused on the customer. And for you, a customer is your audience. And it's like, how do you create something that people want to engage with, that people want to keep coming back to, and engage more and more new people? And that is really such a parallel with what anyone's trying to do with any business, is how can I engage more and more and more people with this? And ultimately that eventually hopefully makes money if it's
but it's interesting because I think the two worlds, the creative world and the entrepreneur world, in some ways it's like they complement each other, or they can feed into each other and actually learn from each other. So where in the world of creativity and being a performer, you're really your driver is the craft, is the artistry, and that's sort of like what's going to keep you going. And in the entrepreneur world, there's like a drive more to sort of like margins, profits, build, growth. How are we doing? And I think that sometimes in that world, it's important to go back to, why did we found this business? What's at the heart of it? Why was I passionate about this to begin with? Let's not lose that in favor of like hitting bigger profit margins. And in this world, it's important to remember that, yes, you've got this creative thing that's driving you, but you need to sometimes compromise that in favor of, I need to also make a living out of this and pay bills and afford myself a life outside of this, which gives me comfort so that I can continue to live as a creative. So I think those two worlds in some ways can definitely complement each other.
But it's interesting because with the world of entrepreneurship and making profit and blah blah blah, actually, like, you can also really see when businesses get distracted, where they end up being led by short-term financials rather than longer term success,
and they lose themselves.
This is a small cultural calculator plug, but there was a Harvard Business School did a study over an 11-year period, and were comparing businesses that had very weak company cultures versus strong performing company cultures. And they found that in the 11-year period, those businesses that were categorized as having a weak culture grew their revenue by 1% in 11 years, versus with strong cultures 756%.
Oh my God.
That's
a huge difference. But it makes sense for two reasons. One, I mean, this idea of like a business having a strong culture, both internally. The thing about it is that if you have a passion at the heart of your business and you don't disconnect from that in favor of profit margins, then what you're really talking about, I think ultimately what it comes down to, and it's the same with a performer, is authenticity. It's about this feeling of, this is authentic. The drive behind this is, it's all of it. It's authentic. We're passionate. We're driven. We're going to compromise on cost. We're going to compromise on this, and this. We're going to make some compromises because we're going to put back at the heart of it, what is this business about and why we're doing it. And that is a very strong driver for anyone and for anything, whether it's your workforce. Customers recognize it, they see it, and they don't like to be lied to. So if you started with that and then it's watered down, and then you find out that as a business, actually behind closed doors, you're not functioning in consistency with what your brand ethos is outside of the office, they feel cheated on. So you're actually going to lose, you're going to lose customers that way.
That is so true, because you're right. Like, that passion and authenticity, it is palpable when you can feel it of someone. And the thing that honestly, like, it's a bit of a bugbear at the moment, drives me a bit bananas, is when you see, you meet founders who really do embody what they're doing, and you can feel it. Like, you're like, wow, the business you've created is so infused with the essence of you and how you live your life, versus when it's like, I don't know, you see things where, oh, well-being's a big trend, someone that has literally nothing to do with that, but it's like been like, I can make loads of money out. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it does taste and feel different.
And I think it's really interesting because I have spoken to people who have thought about, who want to start a business, and it doesn't really matter who it is. My starter conversation is, do you love it? do you love this? Because it's going to take you years and you're going to be broke and it's going to be shit and it's going to be really hard. So the bottom line is you've got to be fucking passionate about this. Because I remember years ago, before I went to drama school, I decided to open a crepe stand. I started selling crepes on a market in North Yorkshire.
Are my favourite food.
Okay, but these are crepes, so don't insult the Bretons, because, you know, there's definitely a difference. But yes, so I started doing it and I thought it would be a quick buck because, you know, no one was on the market. So I thought they're quite trendy. I started doing it. I did it over 2 months. By the end of the summer, I think I just about made my costs back and maybe a bit of profit on the initial outlay for, you know, the sort of the tarpaulin, the crepe making machines, the gas, whatever, the cost of running the business. And I thought, okay, I can see how you could now start to turn a profit. But did I enjoy getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to make the batter? Did I enjoy rocking up to the different markets and pitching up? No, I didn't. And I thought, I'm not passionate about this, and therefore it's not going to be a successful business. You have to be so passionate about what you're doing, whether you're a performer, whether you're a business builder, founder, entrepreneur, because ultimately that is going to sustain you through those inevitable periods of challenge. I think if you can't work in the business you're starting, don't do it. I'm not interested in people who say, I'm going to start a cleaning business. Are you ready to clean? No, well then don't do it, because you're going to have to clean. And then you get a whole separate category of people who are just investors. They have a lot of money, they find people who are passionate, and then they put money into that business. And if you've got the funds to do that, good for you. But that's a different kind of thing entirely. If you're going to be the person who is making that business happen, it has to start from a place of, I desperately want to see this happen. I have vision. I know what it's going to look like. I can see it. I can manifest it. And then come from that place. Not, I see a gap in the market for vegan ice cream. I'm going to buy a machine. I'm going to start making vegan ice cream, and then I'm going to sell it, because if you are not passionate about vegan ice cream, that I just don't think that business is going to take off.
You're so right, because actually what you're talking about, this is where I'm going with what you're talking about. It's making me realize the difference between an intellectual activity or an intellectual, in inverted commas, good idea versus when you're really being led by your heart. And I think almost the effortlessness of the creativity, that when you are really aligning with what your heart wants to do, just how that becomes a creative outlet. Like, my most effortless and natural moments with Culture Calculator have been when it comes to designing my platform and product. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm thinking about it. It's like something flows out of me. And there is so much out there about never build anything before you've tested XYZ with customers. Well, I did, and my customers loved it, but I don't know whether I would have got there for an intellectual activity. I just had a vision for what I wanted to provide people with. And that didn't come from a head place. It came from what I really, really, really wanted to do.
Yeah. You had a gut on it. And I think you've got to be wary of people saying this is the process that you have to go through in order to achieve that. There's always going to be a lot of why this, why now, and having to answer those questions about, you know, why this, why now, why am I, if you're making a pitch for like an investor, you need to, be mindful of all of those things. But in a way, you can find the justifications for it. And I'm not saying there aren't people who are driven by success itself. You know, you hear about these entrepreneurs who have done a million different versions of a business, and they just keep picking up a business and then building it. And, and so in a way, the passion there, the drive is success, making money. Maybe there's something quite ego or whatever that works for them, and like, great, you're going to have those people as well. And I think it's good to know what your profile is and what kind of person you are. There are people in the creative world who are terrible stand-up comedians, who aren't funny, who are not naturally funny, but who have said to themselves, I really want to do this. I'm going to learn how to format a joke. I'm going to understand how to make a set. And then they go off, they work really hard, they make it happen, But I think that if you're building a business and you're starting from a place of, this is what I'm really passionate about. For you, I want to help businesses. I want to help them figure out what they're about and give the workforce a voice. That's something which is so much more powerful than saying, what can I do that's going to make me money? Where is there a gap in the market and how can I fill it? You know, it's just the value of that is very different. And coming from a place of this is something that I'm really passionate about is going to sustain you for much longer than thinking, how can I make money?
And it also, it's like doing anything that passion, like even having a relationship. It's like life is hard. Like life, you're gonna have times where it's like, this is not fun. No matter what it is you're doing, a relationship, a business, a performance, any of it. And actually it is that love of whatever it is that you are pursuing.
Yeah, but I'm finding this funny because I'm there thinking, yeah, but also sometimes don't go out with the person you're most passionate about. That isn't always the best relationship.
I love how this is now turning into a dating show. But okay, so back to you now.
Yes.
Like, what is it you feel really passionate about for the next chapter of Tatty's journey?
Well, it's interesting, you know, because I think I definitely am constantly realigning myself on the creative pathway and trying to remember that, because when you have spent so long just trying to make a living as a performer, it inevitably ends up feeling really fragile. And so a lot of me is like, oh my God, people are paying me for this, right? Okay. And I'm getting to a place where I'm having to remember, okay, but you need to compromise the finance now, say no to work, in order to realign yourself creatively with what excites you. How do you want to build yourself creatively? So that's definitely a journey that I'm on, about thinking to myself, what is it that I want to do that's going to grow me as a performer? And in terms of myself, my work right now, I'm building a 1-hour show, which is my debut hour, which I'm taking up to Edinburgh Fringe, and then I'm taking on tour. So that's been a really interesting process, you know, writing an hour of a show, bits of stand-up that I've already done, putting it together, trying to find, you know, that's been a new challenge. And that's the thing when you get into being a performer, you think, oh, you know, once I get an agent, I'll be sorted. You get an agent. I need a better agent. You get a better agent. Then you're like, I'm not getting the auditions I want. Then you get the auditions you want. And then you're not getting the jobs. And there's just a constant, the levels all the time of like the next challenge, the next challenge, the next challenge. They never stop. But so I'm building this 1-hour show, taking it to Edinburgh at the Monkey Barrel, 2:10, if anyone's going up to Edinburgh this summer. And then I'm going to, like I said, take it on tour in the UK and in Europe. And then I am working, fingers crossed, if I can get it written, on a book proposal. I really hope my literary agent doesn't see this, because I've been owing her an email. But yeah,
the email's coming. The email's coming,
Jess. Don't worry.
And the book proposal on
what it feels like. It's a coming of age story, but a coming of age story of someone, of an English girl growing up in France, navigating not just becoming an adult, but also becoming an adult in a country where you are in a very English family in a completely different culture, and then equally becoming an adult woman and then moving to the UK and realizing just how French you are. So it's, you know, that story of that we all have, a sort of like going from a girl to being a woman, but with the additional challenge of doing it in a different language, a different landscape, a new environment, between cultures. You know, how does that affect your sense of identity? And your sense of belonging.
Tatty, the thing I love about you and what you just described is how I just know that whole levels thing of the next challenge. I'm just so excited to see where you go. And again, it's like, it's another thing where it's such a parallel with building any kind of business, because you think, oh, if I just manage to sell this, then I'll feel validated about that. But what you realize is, like, as you grow your business, the challenges just become bigger and different. There's always like the next hurdle of what's the next big thing and what's the next big thing. And like, your tenacity, I find so inspiring for me personally to keep pushing myself in that direction, because I know it's something you really do. But We end every episode with 3 questions we ask each
Oh.
guest. Normally, there's kind of a perfect segue into this. This might feel a bit random for you, but let's just go with it anyways. So the first question is, what do you think makes a toxic culture?
I think an environment in which you don't feel like you can openly speak out, where you can't express yourself for fear of repercussions, fear of not being promoted, losing your job, being discriminated against. I think that work environments should be, and I think this is quite a UK issue, be more comfortable with difficult conversations. You should be able to push back on things or have a difficult conversation with your boss about, you asked me to do this and I didn't want to do that and I don't think it's appropriate, or I don't want to work on that project, or I don't I don't want to work late on that day, or whatever that is, without feeling like your job's at risk, without feeling scared that, if I insist on working from home for 4 days a week because I'm feeling a bit down at the moment, or I need to put up bigger boundaries. I think that that's really toxic. I think when you can have a work environment where your staff feel comfortable coming to you and saying something which is a bit difficult, that's a really positive thing.
Love that. Let's flip it on its head.
Okay.
What do you think makes a great culture?
Well, in a way, sort of like the side of that, which I've always really enjoyed working with people. At the risk of people being more blunt and direct, I've always enjoyed working with people where everything is put out there, where you can be in meetings in the morning. I remember working with someone who was known to be quite sort of like driven, could be quite tough, and other people didn't like working with her because it was all a bit intense. But what I found the way in which I found it was easy to work with her was because as much as she could be quite forceful in what she wanted, she was also okay if you were forceful back. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the balance. Totally. So you're allowed to ask a lot from people, but you also have to hear it when they say no.
Yeah.
And as long as you've got space for the no, it's fine. So I think having that kind of a transparent work environment, we'd be in meetings sometimes and she would say, well, why haven't these emails been responded to? We need to get back to these clients. And I would say, well, we haven't got the capacity. We haven't got the capacity to do that. So everyone's working the best that they can right now, but we haven't got the capacity. So either you need to take on another member of staff, or you need to accept that this is the pace at which it's going to happen. Being able to say that, and for that person to go, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a positive work environment.
And you're so right, because when I think of the most direct people I know, like 95% of the time, they appreciate directness back.
Absolutely. And if anything, respect you more for it.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so the final question is, what is the ultimate tip you could offer for creating cultural change for the better?
Speak up.
That's it.
Yeah, speak up. It's really wild the amount of people who don't speak up.
Yeah.
I found myself in green rooms with comedians who have said things which are unacceptable. I have been the only comedian who said, that's not an appropriate thing to say. That's not acceptable. Don't say that. That comes with not being afraid of confrontation as well.
Yeah.
And having a work environment in which you feel able to speak up. But speaking up, saying, no, that didn't make me feel comfortable. That's not okay. You shouldn't have said that. I didn't like the way that you were talking to so-and-so this morning, or that wasn't a very nice thing to say. Just whatever it is on any kind of level, whether it's in the kitchen or it's in a boardroom, and especially to women, speak up. Oh my God, please. It's really, it makes me sad going into leadership development workshops, and just the quality of the voice of women sometimes small, and then you have men. I don't want to make sweeping, generalizations, but sometimes you find men with so much less to say, who have no fear of speaking, and women who have real valuable input to give, but who just, you know, don't have the confidence to speak up. And yeah, if there was one tip that I'd say, just say it, speak up. Don't be afraid to use your voice and say what's on your mind.
I love that about you, because you definitely are someone that does speak up. I know that from personal experience. But also it's something that is so needed. And as someone that, like, I find it scary, like, you know, we just did the whole freaking scenario of getting me to speak up. Like, I do find it scary, but knowing that that is the better option, that is the better thing to do. And even if you are someone that's scared of it, having the courage to let yourself feel afraid and do it, feel the fear and do it anyways. But you are so courageous. I don't even think you realize it, because you just are. And it's been such a pleasure having you.
It's been lovely. Thanks for having me, Grace.